The Last of Us. The Last of Us, this is something that's pretty familiar on the channel. This is a TV adaptation of the video game. The video game is one of my favourite, if not my favourite game of all time. I've played through it like 6 or 7 times. I've played it on the channel at least once and then gone back to it in other videos as well. So I love this story. And now it's a TV show. Now, as we know in the past, any adaptation of a video game, TV or movie has sucked. They've always sucked. They forever will suck. Well, that was the consensus at least. But then this was getting made, and I was thinking the same as everyone else. Oh god, here we go. They're going to butcher it, and if any other studio had picked this up, I would have been very concerned. But because HBO picked it up, I was less concerned. Because HBO, they don't really miss. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the story, this follows the character of Joel living in a post-apocalyptic world due to a fungal outbreak that has infected most of mankind, basically turning them into zombies. And after extreme loss, Joel is tasked with a huge challenge to potentially change the world as they know it. Now, obviously, I know what's going to happen in this story because I've played through the game quite a few times, but with this being an adaptation, things are going to be different. There's going to be little tweaks here and there, characters are going to be different things are going to be said, and obviously when it comes to casting, that was obviously quite a big deal for this show, and because so many people were invested with the game, that was obviously going to be a big talking point. And when Pedro Pascal was cast as Joel, everyone was like, good casting. I agree with that. But then on the other side of things, when Bella Ramsey was cast as Ellie, everyone was like, what the fuck? Including me, to an extent, a little bit. I wasn't, like, super mad, but I was just a bit like, I'm not sure. And I'm sure a lot of that is based on looks. You know, Pedro kind of looks like Joel. Bella Ramsey doesn't really look like Ellie, but, you know, you can't really be too picky, especially when it's an adaptation. It can't be exactly the same. But after watching the first episode, it's clear that the key word here is adaptation. Characters will look different. They may even be a different nationality or race, but when the acting and the writing and the execution is great, none of it matters. And the execution is great here. I'm already totally immersed in this world, and I'm glad that it's not a complete carbon copy, because I don't want it to be a copy of the game that I've played many times. You know, that is special in that way because it is its own thing with its own unique personality. Obviously, this show is going to have its own personality, so that's kind of the point. It can offer something different. It can tell the story in a slightly different manner. So it's for the best that it's not just a copy and paste of the game. And if you're familiar with the game as I am, you will notice same lines of dialogue being used, the same outfits, but you'll also notice the changes here, the extra interactions, how situations pan out differently but ultimately still lead to the same conclusion. This makes the show still fascinating for me because there's quite a few situations in this show where I'm like, oh, they're going to go that way and, you know, that's going to happen. It doesn't go out that way. It ultimately still leads to the same thing, like the same key moment is still going to happen, but they take a completely different route to get to it. Characters will go a different way, they'll make a different decision, they'll say a different thing. And I quite enjoyed that aspect because it meant I wasn't just sitting here like, oh yeah, that's going to happen, they're going to go down that fucking road. Like, I couldn't just sit there and predict it and get it right. They were offering something different. But for the most part, this is staying true to the source material. The same soundtrack and original artist are being used here, which is great because I really love the soundtrack. As I said, costumes and lines of dialogue will remain the same at times. And so far, it's just a great balance. And I think it's definitely worth mentioning the casting here. Pedro as Joel, as I said, is really good here. I really see that as great casting, and I think that's going to prove, you know, heavily as the show goes on that was probably the ideal person for this role. And I enjoyed everyone else here, all the side characters for now, as Joel is sort of taking center stage right now. But, you know, Ellie, Sarah, Tess, Marlene, all really solid. I love what they're bringing. They feel true to the characters, but it also feels like they're bringing a little something different as well. So I really like the dynamic, especially when you're getting the interactions. It's really exciting when you know certain characters are going to talk to each other for the first time in this show. It's interesting to see how those first interactions will unfold on the TV show compared to how they did in the game. Now, this first episode is more like 2 episodes. You know, obviously this show is apparently 9 episodes, but this really felt like episode 1 and 2 just sort of merged together because you get the whole, like, prologue, I guess you'd call it, which is the bit that's set when Joel is younger and he has his daughter Sarah. It covers all of that and adds to it, and then it also has a hefty chunk of the 20 years later segment that appears in the game, whether in the Boston QZ. So it covered a lot. I really thought this first episode would just be, all the stuff before the initial outbreak of the pandemic, but it covers a lot. And the pacing is fucking impressive. It's covered what happens in game in what seems like half the time, but then it's also added a lot more to that prologue segment, which I'm really glad they did, because it allowed them to just flesh out a bit more about Joel, what he did, before things went to shit, a bit more about Tommy, a bit more about his daughter. You just learn some extra bits. You get those extra scenes, and it really just did add more, made the world feel a little more full. It also seamlessly adds extra scenes for like Joel and Tess and Ellie, scenes that obviously you don't get in the game because you're kind of sticking with a certain perspective. But here, I don't know, you just get some little extra scenes thrown in with like more of the side characters. And for that reason, you're getting an extra insight to events that unfold in the game. You're getting to see how one thing led to another. For example, why they're going after Robert in the first place. And they even make some slight alterations as to the reason why, and what's being bought, what's being sold, how they get to that point. But I enjoyed how they altered those things and how we learned some extra things. Obviously, you've got the same director who directed the game, Neil Druckmann, heavily involved with this show, so it's not like someone's just come in and said, yeah, I'm not interested in what they did in the game, I want to fucking go this route instead. Neil Druckmann has obviously given this the green light, he's okayed it, he said, alright, let's change it that way. So therefore you're not going too far away from the source material. The sets are also very impressive here. I really like the locations, especially when we get to the Boston quarantine zone. I just really like how that looked. It looks so true to what the game had going on with that Boston QZ, and it just makes me excited for when we go to future locations, such as Billstown or Wyoming, just all the different locations. That's the thing, because the game has so many great and like iconic segments to it, I'm very excited to see them in live action. The infected don't get a major look in this first episode, but what we do get is almost like an education into the infection. At the start of this episode, you get like a talk show going on that's set in the 60s, and you got this scientist of sorts talking about how fungus and like cordyceps work, and he mentions this video, well, not this video, but it's a video I've seen, and he mentions like an example where cordyceps infects an ant and then takes control of its brain. I've seen the video, it's really grim, but you should look at it, it's quite interesting. And he sort of mentions how if that ever happened to humans, if fungus and cordyceps could infect a human, it would just be chaos and you wouldn't be able to stop it. And I just love that they threw that in there. I think it's so ominous, and it also gives us as a viewer like a little bit of education as to, how it works, because he even says like if the earth were to heat up a little bit more, if it got a bit hotter, fungus could then potentially infect humans, and obviously we know that's what's happened with the earth. So I like that they threw that in there, because with the game you're just kind of like, you don't really know much about how the infection started and why it would start. But yeah, I waffled a bit there. As I said, you don't really see too much infected, you just see what's known as runners, so that's like early infected, because we don't really see any infected when we do the time jump. So therefore I'm aching to see clickers and bloaters, but obviously that's only a matter of time. We've seen them in the trailers, they look fucking insane, the makeup and costume on that. I just can't wait to see it. I really like this idea of a zombie that isn't based on like a virus, but it's based on a fungus. I think it makes them look so much cooler. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing those further down the line. I don't really have any complaints about this first episode, honestly. I think it so far is very, very strong. I think it's a very strong adaptation. I love a lot of things that they've done here. The creative decisions are great, the alterations, and I'm really looking forward to how this pans out. I think whether you've played the game or not played the game, I think you should watch this. This is really, really promising so far. I hope it can just build on this, and I really think it will. Obviously initial reviews have been very solid. I can safely say this first episode is great. I was just fully immersed, and it was really weird. As I was watching it, I was saying to myself, I could sit here for like 10 hours and just watch this whole thing. I could watch this whole first season. I don't usually feel like that about shows, but I really felt I could have just sat there and watched it all. I think this first episode's great, honestly. I would give The Last of Us episode 1 a 9 out of 10. And you're thinking, why not 10/10? Well, 10/10s will probably come further down the line. I can't say this was like, 10/10 is like exceptional, but this was pretty damn great. Whether I will review this week to week, I think I will, because I'm quite, I don't know, I feel like I have a lot of stakes in this story, because I played the game. I don't know, I just love it. I love this story. So I think I will review it week to week, just give my feedback on it a little bit, because I think it'll be a fun thing to a fun series to stick with and review. But yeah, if you've seen it, let me know what you think about it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.